welcome back. We're unpacking what's happening in the Middle East, and joining me again is Mariam Memarsadeghi and Sarah Teich. Thank you both again so much for joining me. Just before we went to commercial break, Sarah, we were talking about Hamas, and to give our viewers a little bit of a historical context. So where did this group come from, and have we seen anything like this from them in the past?
Right. So, I mean, they've committed terrorist attacks against civilians, certainly, nothing of this magnitude. And we see Israel's found on the bodies of some of the terrorists who were killed, documents revealing that this has been a plan that they've been working on for a long time in coordination, potentially with Hezbollah and the Iranian mullahs. Although that still seems to be a bit up in the air, the extent of that involvement in the training. But certainly this is Hezbollah's aim. Hamas's aim. Hamas has right in their charter that they aim to destroy the Jewish people. They want every single Jewish person out of the Middle East. So this is really in keeping with all of that. And you framed it earlier as a conflict between Israel and Palestine, or rather that it wasn't just a conflict, I should say, between Israel and Palestine. But really, it's not even close to that in the sense that it's Israel and Hamas. And Hamas, in addition to oppressing Israelis and Jews around the world, also oppresses the Palestinian civilians of Gaza.
Yes, and I think that's a very important distinction. Because when we see some of these pro-Hamas banners being waved and this chanting at even rallies here in Canada, for goodness sake, people say, "Oh, we stand with the Palestinian people." Do you really? If they have a track record of a persecution of their own people, my goodness. So, Mariam, let's talk about that elephant in the room, Iran. So what role do you believe, or through your research have you uncovered, that Iran had in all this, in supporting Hamas from the beginning and till this recent tragedy, this terrorist attack?
Well, Hamas wouldn't exist if not for Iran's regime. So that's first and foremost, this is a terror organization that just would not exist without the support of Iran's regime. Ideologically, they're aligned. They want to see Israel destroyed. As Sarah said, no Zionist entity in the Middle East region. They, beyond ideology, they provide intelligence, equipment, funding, training. So what's the real question right now is, why are we talking about the lack of support of Iran's regime for this particular attack? And I think the reason that the Biden administration, other governments, democratic governments around the world may be hesitant to show that their intel reveals Iran's role in coordination and planning of this attack is, one, they might want to hold that card for later, use it as leverage against the regime to try and contain this conflict. But two, and this is not as hopeful a reason, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, European Union, in the last year or two, despite the woman life freedom movement inside Iran for wholesale regime change, have actually continued a policy of appeasement towards Iran's regime, including through massive financial concessions. Mm-hmm. Which include a recent ransom payment of $6 billion. So, the Biden administration is going to be reluctant to admit how its own policy is entangled in this appeasement of Iran's regime, which is, of course, the direct supplier and funder of Hamas. So even though President Biden's statements in support of Israel have been the strongest that we've seen from a U.S. president ever, really, it doesn't change the fact that over the last year and earlier through the Obama administration's policies in the last year or two, but also the Obama administration's policies, unfortunately, there was a lot of kowtowing to Iran's regime and a lot of financing of Iran's regime through financial concessions, lifting of sanctions, and turning a blind eye to enforcement of sanctions that exist to the extent that now Iran's oil revenue is what it was years ago before maximum pressure was imposed by the previous US administration.
Yes, and you brought up so many very valid points there. There seems to have been very clearly a role that the U.S. foreign policy played in perhaps bringing upon this attack. And when you talked about the $6 billion, yes, the U.S. recently unfroze that. Many of us are asking why, and now we have this attack. We're going to pick this up in just a few moments.